Well, I would like to start with some background. Fellows around the world have an expertise and commitment to developing partnerships to promote the goals of civil society, for example, in the arenas of conflict resolution, the promotion of social justice, human rights, health provision, combating climate change, and the promotion of the freedom of religion. These partnerships and commitments have become vital in the last few months as the world has experienced a global pandemic, resulting in the recorded fatalities of over 1 million people. These partnerships have become a priority for those overseeing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The UN Sustainable Development Goals promote the concept of multi-stakeholder partnerships. This is highlighted in the SDG 17, which, amongst other forms of partnerships, promotes multi-stakeholder partnerships, the very area of core expertise of both the KAICIID fellows, their institutions and networks. The target under SDG 17, most relevant to the KAICIID International Fellow Network, includes the development of multi-stakeholders partnerships to tackle and promote the aims of the SDGs blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future, and also to end poverty and other deprivations, improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth whilst tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. The SDG defined the work of KAICIIDs globally in terms of their ability to forge new multi-stakeholder partnerships that at times can access both communities and individuals more namely than the private or public sector. In working with the private and public sector, civil society, in particular the faith sector, has become a willing and effective partner that has proved its own worth in recent moments following the COVID-19 outbreak. Well, this is talking about our challenges. KAICIID fellows have developed relationships between civil society and the public sector that had strengthened in the light of the COVID-19. Our fellows have created multi-faith and interfaith partnerships to deliver and contribute to alleviation of poverty, the promotion of environmental goals, social justice, and to provide support to communities and individuals, especially during the global pandemic. In Argentina and other Latin American countries during the COVID-19 crisis, religious organizations strengthened previously existing multi-religious partnerships to provide food assistance in community centers and distributing food aid to each home. Every time the economy goes down, it implies the affection of human rights. The global depression highlighted the way in which private partnerships, including religions and multi-faith organizations, are relevant to filling the gaps of the public sector. In many countries, even places of worship were made available to provide different social services to the people affected both by the pandemic and the economic crisis. Religious leaders and institutions need to be listened and included in discussions as development partners to prevent further crises and to build resilience and solidarity on their respective communities, and not just when certain crises arise. A progressive involvement of them in development debates and tables could also enhance their commitment in the professional assessment of indicators. In Sri Lanka, for example, an interfaith parliamentarian committee created the conditions for a formal dialogue between policymakers and religious leaders. These kind of initiatives can create awareness of the contribution of religious leaders, institutions, and communities to the achievement of the SDGs. In Myanmar, a program based on education for teachers from different faith backgrounds brought an increase in the understanding about one another, contributing to build stronger relationships. Religious literacy should be a part of the development agenda to build common citizenship through a deeper understanding and acceptance of the religious and cultural diversity of our communities. We are talking about rule of law and religious rights. At the U.S. Institute of Peace, the Religion and Inclusive Societies program has convened a series of workshops for U.S. policymakers and practitioners focused on religious actors' roles in preventing and countering violent extremism. These half-day sessions allowed practitioners and religious actors to discuss with one another and with U.S. government actors some of the challenges, opportunities, and best practices to work together effectively in this space. KAICIID Fellows are committed to the promotion of human rights and the enhancement of the rule of law. Human dignity and the respect of the other is a golden thread that links the great religions of the world. There is a need for faith communities to reinforce human rights as much as there is a need for human rights institutions to reinforce the role of faith communities to be able to act freely and in concert with human rights defenders. Although we all agreed about the urgency of addressing violent extremism and violence in the name of religion, the international community should not underestimate the commitment of religious communities with human rights and with the development of common citizenship around the world. In this sense, some narrow and state-centric perspective need to develop a wider understanding of religion, to acknowledge how partnerships with religious leaders and institutions can enhance rule of law. We need to counter violent extremism, but we have to counter also the idea that religions are solely responsible for it. We need to dig deeper in the causes of conflict in each specific context. So, going to our concrete recommendations. In the first place, to include religious leaders, FBOs, and multi-religious institutions as development partners, involving them in a multi-stake partnerships aimed at specific SDGs at local, national, and international levels. Second, to improve the awareness by policymakers of religious communities' contribution to development. Third, to improve the FBO's commitment to professional assessment of indicators and result-based management of their social projects aimed at the SDGs. Four, to include religious literacy in the development agenda in order to build common citizenship through a deeper understanding and acceptance of the religious and cultural diversity of our communities. This talking about religious and multi-faith partnerships. Talking about rule of law and religious rights, to reinforce the role of faith communities to be able to act freely and in concert with human rights defenders at international human rights institutions, to involve policymakers and practitioners in dialogue sessions with religious leaders to identify challenges, opportunities, and the best practices to work together in peace-building activities, and finally, to enlarge the perspective of the preventing violent extremism and countering violent extremism frameworks within a wider scope that takes into account multi-track diplomacy strategies as well as the possibilities of conflict transformation through interreligious and intercultural dialogue, addressing conflicts at local level and through regional, multilateral organizations. Thank you very much. Thank you to my group fellows, and thank you to KAICIID for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ale, for sticking to the time and for the very well structured presentation. Now I will kindly ask Sarah to also